Welcome to the Marketing Liverpool Visitor Economy Update, coming to you live from the MSP Virtual Studio.
Right, good afternoon everybody, and a warm welcome to today's Marketing Liverpool Visitor Economy Update. Got a cracking panel for you here today, and we're going to discuss and debate the many subjects that are affecting our great visitor economy here in the city region, and to try and see if we can try and unlock some of the many puzzles that sit out there to get our economy back up and running again. First and foremost though, I want to greatly thank MSP for all their support for today and for giving us the opportunity of just presenting to this in a slightly different format here directly live from their studio here in Bootle. So before we get going with the rest of the day, I just want to introduce you to a short video, give you a bit of a background to what you're seeing here at the MSP studio.
Thank you, Chris. We have created an innovative way to deliver your next event online, but without missing out on the fun. It could be an awards ceremony, conference, product launch or panel discussion. The studio can be built to suit your individual needs, incorporating our LED video wall, studio lighting, branded lectern and broadcast cameras, making it look as extravagant or as simple you want it to be. We understand engaging the audience might seem challenging, which is why we brought Q&As, voting systems, video conferencing and social media walls to the rescue. We can also offer content creation, including on-screen graphics and an edited video, so you can keep a record or use it for further distribution. Of course, safety is our first priority, which is why, after we set up your virtual studio, you will then only interact at a safe distance with one member of the team for the duration of the event. Chris, I hope you enjoyed the MSP Lockdown Lounge. Should you be interested in finding out more about our virtual studio, you can call our project managers on 0344 811 0901 or visit our website msp-av.co.uk.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much. So hopefully it gives you a bit of a backdrop. I never thought a few months ago that we'd be starting to do promos about how to promote virtual events, but there we go. So let's have a look at the panel for today and just give you a bit of an indication about how the day is going to run. In a minute or two, I'm going to hand over to our Metro Mayor, Steve Rotheram, to give an update on the work he's been doing, the great work he does on behalf of you and on the city region, promoting our city region, promoting the things that need to be done to help our city region. So we'll go to Steve first. Then I'm delighted that we're welcoming today Janet Uttley from Visit Britain. Janet's been doing a lot of work at Visit Britain level around kite marks, about having a look at how we can give that confidence to people using our businesses, that they're safe and good to use, and she'll give an update on that. And I'm sure she'll talk about many other things that Visit Britain are doing at this moment in time. I'll then sort of hand over to Pete Sandman from the Growth platform, who's working with us on this program today, to give you an update about what's been happening across the city region. And then on to Laura Pye, the chair of the Visitor Economy Board, who will give her own personal update on the things that she's been up to, and introduce then our four esteemed panelists representing parts of the city region. And that'll be Bill Addy from the Liverpool Visitor Economy Network, Paul Askew, the well-known Paul Askew from the Wirral, then obviously Peter Hampson from Southport, and least but certainly not last, Edward from Knowsley Safari Park and chair of the Knowsley Place Board. Now, during the course of the webinar, it would be really great for us to get as many questions as you can put forward and that we can hopefully answer during the course of the next hour or so. It's really important at this moment in time, with so much uncertainty, that we gather as much of your thoughts as we possibly can. So I want to leave enough space at the end of this to be able to get through as many of those questions with the panelists as we possibly can. But let's crack on with the afternoon, and it gives me a great pleasure to to bring in Metro Mayor Steve Rotheram now to give us an update on the things that Steve's been up to. Busy guy, Steve, but thanks very much for joining us today. Look forward to your update.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for the invite to the virtual meeting of everybody who's involved in the regional tourism sector, and certainly its importance to our city region. And I've been asked to speak briefly about the city region's priorities and the plans for the future, I suppose, which of course I'm happy to do, but I do want to keep it brief as I possibly can, because you've just seen the stellar lineup of what's happening, and those questions that you pose will all be collated, and they're really important because we have regular dialogue with government departments at all levels, including the Prime Minister, and I want to put some of the things that you will have to say, and if you had the chance to speak to him, that you'd like to put directly to the Prime Minister. I want to ensure that those issues are well aired. But you've probably heard, for instance, that myself and Andy Burnham, we've been very very vocal in the local media and across the whole country, indeed, with something called Build Back Better. And it's a campaign, really, that does what it says on the tin. So put simply, it means that we can't return to the old ways of doing things once the pandemic abates. And of course, it will, although it will be some time before I think we really see that happening. But at the end of that, we will return to some sort of normality, won't we? And I know that lots and lots of areas have been battered by the lockdown, including, of course, the visitor economy. But it's also, for instance, impacted on our cash-strapped councils who have had a decade of austerity. And now on top of that, there's a huge shortfall in the COVID monies that they were promised. The first lot of money was predicated on social deprivation and need. The second tranche was on per capita, so just a population extrapolation, which meant that, of course, the 6 local authority areas in the Liverpool City Region lost out more than anywhere else in the country. We were promised 341 million, got 100 million, so you can work out the deficit yourself. So it's hit everyone, including the combined authority. We're losing about £5 million per month, and it's hit businesses hard, of course. Indeed, we've seen that, unfortunately, some businesses won't recover from what's happened, and they'll be lost to us forever. And lots of those will be in the visitor economy. And you know, these are really important economic factors that we have to take consideration of every single day. But in addition to all of that, we've been devastated by higher infection rates than the national average and some of the highest mortality rates in the whole country. I have to say though, despite the worrying ongoing medical crisis, which I'd never try to underplay, there have been some really brilliant things that have happened, that have come out of this, and which give us the opportunity to build on as we go forward. And they centre mainly around clean air and people more active in their travel, and hopefully walking and cycling will continue for some considerable time, although I'm sure when the bad weather returns, that might reduce somewhat. There's been greater recognition of key workers and some of the things that people who have been undervalued for so long and certainly underpaid do for us as a society. There's been a greater sense of community. You know, I'd love to put a poll up and ask the question, how many of you have led on to your neighbours for the first time, probably in your lifetimes or in many, many years? So we need to do that. And of course, then there's all the stuff around flexible working and the new ways of working. As Chris said, who'd have thought that we'd be doing what we're currently doing virtually, when our normal everyday life is everybody congregating and getting together, and the interaction and the human aspect of that, which I do think very much is missing, because you can't see the reactions on people's face. And what we're looking for is cross-party, cross-region. That's a campaign to push all of those issues to the fore, and we need to ensure that they don't fall by the wayside as we return to whatever it is that we're going to call normal at the end of all this. But just to let you know, we've got our eyes firmly fixed on the next phase of what happens, which is recovery. And we've written and rewritten our local industrial strategy with a recovery focus. So we're establishing a business and economic recovery panel that I hope that you will have read about in the local press, and we're lobbying government for the funds that we will need. I'm told there's going to be an announcement on the economic stimulus. We don't know what that looks like. I've spoken to the Prime Minister himself. He didn't give any clues away, but we know that something's going to come, and we want to ensure that we get the right shape for our city region so that we can exploit any opportunities that might come. But there are too many people that the government in their announcements have left behind, and I'm a supporter of things like Forgotten Limited, which is a campaign, as you'll know, which is doing great stuff, and things like Raise the Roof. I've spoken again to senior ministers, and we're lobbying government on this. For instance, for those people who've fallen through the gaps, who just happen to be limited companies, we believe that Rishi Sunak should do the right thing by increasing the threshold from 51,000 now, isn't it, to 150,000 as a starter for 10, and to even go further than that. But he really needs to look after those people who for many, many years have done brilliant things in the visitor economy and created that growth in areas like the city region. And we just have to take stock, don't we? Look, let's not forget that we were the fastest growing city region before the virus struck. And so we're starting to pull together a new vision, a vision for the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it might be, with specialisms in things that give us a competitive advantage in UK PLC. Life sciences, for instance, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, clean energy, our tidal project, which again, I've spoken to senior government ministers about, and of course, all of you in the visitor economy. So everything that's happened is a major setback, and the visitor economy, hospitality industry, and the whole sector is likely to suffer an own massive hit way after perhaps the rest of the economy starts to pick up. And in our city region, that employs 50,000 people. It generates about £5 billion to the economy. And so we have to ensure, by working with governments and planning for the future, that it can bounce back. And look, I'm convinced that we can work together. I'm happy to work with you. I have conversations with lots of people who will be on this call. But we want to work in conjunction with organisations and panels that are already in place to start to make that happen. And so I'll leave it there, because I'll end by saying to those people who have been in contact, thank you for your support and assistance to date. It enables me, when I do speak to government, to speak with one voice, with an evidence of people's views that the government, I'm convinced, will have to take into cognizance. So thank you for inviting me. Any questions that anyone has, Chris has said that he'll collate them, and then what we'll do is that they'll be sent to me at the end of this, and we will try to get responses as quickly as possible. I'm sorry I can't stay for the rest of the event. I wish you all the very best, and stay safe. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Steve. That was encouraging messages you gave out there, and great to know that you're firmly behind all of the visitor economy here in the city region. So we'll move on now to another close friend and colleague of ours, Janet Uttley from Visit Britain. Obviously, Visit Britain are a pivotal partner for both ourselves and the Growth Platform in terms of how we can work with them effectively in terms of remobilising and rebuilding the markets, both domestically and on an international level in time. One of the areas that Janet's been focusing on with the colleagues of Visit Britain has been around creating confidence for consumers going into premises and the health and safety messages around that. So I'm sure she will cover that, but I'm sure she will cover a number of other things as well. So a nice warm welcome to Janet. Thanks for joining us, Janet.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Lovely. Fabulous. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me. Interesting to hear Steve's update as well. Yes, lots of work and activity going on at Visit Britain in terms of what we're doing to help industry and to support industry going through this current situation, which is challenging us all. We quickly moved into action quite speedily when COVID broke, and looked at what could we do and how could we position ourselves to be that trusted voice for the industry, and realigned our work from business as usual to very much look at the 5 key pillars that we would work under. And I'm certainly working very hard under one of those pillars, which is on recovery preparation, which is fast moving and underway now, in terms of what we can do in line with a domestic campaign. Now, those of you that know us will know that we do not, as an arm's length body, traditionally have funding to market domestically. Our usual remit is international, which of course is not going to be something that we would do this year. There is no point in us marketing right now internationally. So what's happened is we've realigned our thinking and realigned what we're doing, and we're looking at this domestic recovery campaign that will aid and help as you go and as you move through, and as you will begin to get to that point where, fingers crossed, we move towards that reopening, and our reopening date that we work towards, the 4th of July. Now, although we've got outdoors and gardens that are alive now, we know that 4th of July is kind of that pivotal point for us. And I do understand that 4th of July is the same date for zoos and aquaria. You know, that's no different. There is not an issue there in regards to them having an unidentified date. It is in line with the rest of tourism as 4th of July. It may change, but that's how it is right now. So the rest of the team and what they do and what the day-to-day looks like for us, there is a convened group called the TIER group, the Tourism Industry Emergency Response Group, and that group, as a normal run, has, you know, meetings every other month. It's not a regular thing. Since COVID hit in the early days, it was daily. Now it's on a weekly meet, but there are daily updates that go out, and Chris receives those, and Chris gets all of those updates, as does Peter, to enable Chris to share with you the information that comes out of that tier grouping. And that's been a key group for us to feed back to government and to our minister and into cabinet, because, you know, our minister has hosted cabinet meetings throughout this period of being able to make sure that the tourism voice and the visitor economy voice is heard. So that takes quite an extensive amount of work, but that has proved to be the way that we've sort of raised our profile, and very much been saying, you know, what we need from government to help us. In terms of guidance for government, that will be coming out. They are working on that now, and across DCMS and BAYS there is various guidance documents being prepared. I know that everybody is very keen to see those, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the industry standard and where we fit on that. Chris did mention that there'd been a pre-question in relation to what research we're carrying out in terms of consumer research. And that consumer research, that brand tracker information, the COVID-19 consumer sentiment research is live on our website now, and we will make the link available so you can find it easily. We've done week 1, that's completed and that's live, and week 2 is due out on Monday. I won't go into the details of that research, but that is there on the website if that is something that would be useful for you to have. In relation to how we're working across the sector, we are very much the trusted voice. If you come to us and you have a particular problem, which will come via Chris or Peter, we will make sure that we put that forward and work on how we can help you with that. So, you know, there are varying different examples of where you, as an organisation, we've run at pace and fast to make sure that we can help as much as we can where those situations arise. Now going into that recovery phase and what we're doing, the marketing team are realigned, the web team are realigned, the social media team are realigned, working very closely to gather in those insights and those messages. What we want to do right now is we are doing a campaign around we're on pause and we want to press play. And being on pause is about whetting appetites and telling people what they can, you know, visit when we go back to that point, but also the things that they're missing doing to gather that momentum again. We do know that our reputation internationally is struggling. There is no surprise there. And we do know that our in-market teams are telling us that the spotlight is on us because our reputation going through COVID is not strong. And so what we wanted to do was to do something that could help with that consumer sentiment and that consumer confidence. And that brings me into the work that I've been leading on in terms of this industry standard. We went out to consultation to the industry bodies because we were getting inundated with asks of, why aren't you doing something to help us with consumer messaging? What are the plans? We've got various different parts of the country forming their own groupings with kite marks and quality marks and various different approaches. And what the industry themselves were saying was, please can you do something about this? Because this is going to dilute the work that we want to do. If we do this as a collective, it will have resonance. So following on from talking to the industry bodies, it was evident that there's a lot of guidance being produced, formed, going through. It's the granular detail. And we knew that that space was not what was needed of us. Actually, what was needed of us was to help with that consumer messaging and to gather in that guidance and provide almost that umbrella, that platform, so that if a particular part of the industry needed granular detail, we would be able to get our hands on it quickly to provide that support. So this new platform will do that. It is very much going to be centred around Public Health England guidance, and also the DCMS guidance will feed into it, but Public Health England first and foremost. And it will be very much centred about the evidence base of, you know, COVID-19 risk assessments, and templates will be in place. All good businesses should have that regardless. You are protecting yourselves by having that, should anything untoward arise. And so that is a key requirement. This online platform will be a complete of around 20 questions, key questions of things that you need to make sure that you're covering within a COVID-19 situation. Which will then help and uncover maybe any areas where there might be confusion. And again, as I say, we will have a call handling system that will help with any of those questions that might be, I'm not sure I knew that, or I'm not sure if I've confidently covered that area. Taking you right the way through, it will highlight where you're a member of a membership organisation such as UK Hospitality, ALVA, BALPA, any of those key industry bodies that have the guidance that helps you go through a little quicker through the process. And then at the end of that, you will have the branding, a small toolkit and a certificate to display to show that you are, and our working title for this, which is going through consumer testing now, is good to go. And being good to go is where we want to have the whole of the industry showcasing that as good to go, we have done what we need to do to welcome back our visitors. The go live of this will be around week commencing the 15th. And shortly after that, a week to 2 weeks after that, we'll kick in the domestic recovery campaign. And the domestic recovery campaign will reference and cover this and explain what this is about, alongside what we want to do in terms of that campaign itself. So I could go on forever on this one because I'm quite passionate about how we get the rollout on this, because we've had such positive feedback, and I will take questions if anybody's keen to hear more. But what I would say is, first and foremost, Chris is going to be kept in the loop, Pete is going to be kept in the loop, and so those are your first ports of call. And also, please, right now, could you be thinking about, if you are beginning these processes of what you're doing to get ready, can you start capturing it? Because short clips on your social media and that we will share, showing how you're preparing and how you're getting yourselves ready, are a great way of providing confidence. And we want to have that. We want to be able to build that confident message. So I think in a nutshell, that's where we've got to now, but happy to take questions if there's anything that is uppermost in your mind.
Okay, okay. Thanks very much, Janet. And I'm actually no doubt we'll want to come back to you on a few of that. I'm sure the audience will as well. But it's good to know that, you know, that within the context of what we're trying to do locally, that you guys at Visit Britain are behind us. I think there's an interesting point there, I think, which is an underpinning word that is coming across everything, and that's the word confidence. And I think, you know, I think as we begin to move towards the 15th of June, which is the opening of non-essential retail, that confidence will be stretched at that moment in time as we start to welcome more and more people back into the city centre, and getting the joined up health messaging around that right will be critical in terms of being able to stimulate the demand that would be built from people thinking, whether they're working or they're coming in as a consumer, that the city centre is a safe place to come. And that will be the same whether you're in the city of Liverpool or you're in any part of Wirral or any other part of the city region. So we generally believe that confidence issue is the key, and you'll see some very joined up and coordinated safety messages around that. And probably Bill might pick this up a little bit more in detail when it comes to him later in the day. But I think the challenge we have in one respect is that, you know, as Steve was saying, the city region has been quite badly hit by COVID. So we are in a fragile position in terms of being able to accelerate demand without taking us back into a second spike. We desperately want to avoid any likelihood of starting to progress the reopening and then have to go back into lockdown. So this fragile situation we have between demand and confidence and safety. As far as ML is concerned, and what we're looking at in terms of the marketing and the development of marketing, I mean, generally our work is very much about being on the front foot and being proactive and being out there to produce the messaging that gets people to come here and to stay here and to reflect on the great enjoyment they have when they do come here. What we're having to do in this case is slightly different, but is also important in the context of the fact that you can be assured that we are well prepared for both the local marketing campaign, for the domestic marketing campaign, and beginning to think about interfacing and interacting on the international campaign. And in doing that, we need to be very strong, particularly when we come to the domestic marketing, that we have a very coherent and strong set of messaging, because every single part of the UK will be doing this, and every single part of Europe and internationally will be basically trying to rebuild their market. So it's going to be a very competitive space out there, and we've got to be ready for it. But we have some brilliant assets here, some great offers, some great products. So I'm pretty sure that will be the case. But the difference here, I think, is that we're not going to be announcing it's going to start on X date or Y date. We will basically align that, and we'll press that demand button when we know that the health messaging and the impact, particularly from the opening of retail, is in the right space. So you kind of need to trust us a bit on that, but we are very clearly behind understanding the need to be able to trigger demand when the right opportunities come around. I think, having said that as well, it's critically important that we don't forget the survival phase. And I know, like Paul Askew and a number of others have done some sterling work in that space around Raise the Bar, about basically making sure that insurance companies do what they should be doing and not what they are doing, about ensuring that fundamentally businesses are in a better place to be able to move forward. So there are a couple of things that we are quite keen on at the moment. One is, on behalf of our regional airports, is to get government to shift away from this blanket 14-day quarantine. That we think is really quite bizarre at this moment in time. And also, I think, hopefully to be able to reduce the social distancing in time from the 2 metre to 1 metre, which we think will have a massive impact, particularly on the hospitality sector. But again, I don't think that will come into play until our statistics are in a better place than they currently are at this moment in time. So we'll pick up some of those things, Janet, later on, and also some of the Steve. I'll hand over now to Pete Salmon from the Growth Platform. I think Steve's you're going to do a few slides as well, Pete. So I'll hand over to you, and then we'll crack on with Laura and the rest of the panel.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I had a presentation there, but for some reason it's unfortunately not displaying. So I'll just try and do it verbally for you. So great to see everybody anyway. Really difficult times to appreciate, but it's nice to be back in touch. I just wanted to start really by just giving a very quick update just in terms of what we've been doing from the growth platform perspective. And through the Visitor Economy Board, we started doing quite a bit of modelling in April time when this first struck, just to try and understand the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on the city region. And kind of during that first April to June period, recognised it's probably around about £1.3 billion that we've kind of suffered for and lost, and then kind of moved that on towards around about 2.4 billion by the time we get to December. And that's kind of based on predictions made by the Office for Budget Responsibility. And whilst that's really hard hitting, the importance is that we've got an idea and understanding of the impacts on the sector, which is key for helping us to try and secure funding for recovery. Just in terms of the growth platform itself, again, there's been an awful lot of people doing an awful lot of work on this. And I think our focus, certainly over the last 2 to 3 months or so, has been really around trying to make sure that all of that government guidance, all of that association guidance, etc., that's coming through is coordinated, is being regularly updated. So the growth platform website itself has had a number of updates on there, specific for visitor economy, but also for general business support, advice and guidance. So I will get this presentation out to you once you can share it, but all that information's on there. Some of the other work we have been doing, particularly with the Combined Authority and the Visitor Economy Board, is the board met in April time. We agreed an action plan, really, and that was shared with the Combined Authority. We had a meeting with Steve, Frank Rogers and some senior officials back in May time, where we got kind of guidance and agreement really in terms of the importance of the sector and how that's going to be essentially kind of linked into the CA's overarching recovery plan. I'll come on to that later on. And then really just picking up on the kind of updates that Janet gave, just in terms of that, the guidance that we are looking at in terms of the 4th of July potential reopening. You know, we will and we are looking at all the government updates to make sure that any information on that is on the growth platform website so you can download it, but also in terms of making sure that that is linked through to a lot of really good work that's been done by UK Hospitality in terms of, you know, preparation for the 4th of July in terms of your risk assessments and how that links through to the kite mark that Janet was describing earlier on. Obviously, a couple of challenges for us really still to be determined are the opening for kind of events and venues where, you know, significant crowds can gather, particularly indoors, and there's currently no guidance in terms of when those restrictions are going to be lifted. So again, that's something that we are looking on. And the other element to this is we've been, again, working quite closely with Visit Britain, particularly during April and May time, to help shape their policies. And that was really helpful for us because I think it allowed us to have a voice and it helped us shape Visit Britain policy, which then went to government around recovery and the particular elements there really focusing around kind of safety and standards, as Janet was touching on. Also employee safety and training, particularly financial support and business aid, and then looking at the kind of longer term measures for recovery. And one thing that I think was really important for us was the fact that we saw that the kind of tourism sector deal hadn't been lost. And there was a potential repurpose of these things called tourism zones, which I've spoken to at length about in previous sessions, but actually repurposing them in the sense of how we as a city region would help level up, but also how we would adapt and respond to the challenges that coronavirus are obviously facing us as a sector. So just a couple of other things as well with this, just touching on quickly to consumer sentiment trends. We've been trying to work with Visit Britain. We are working with Visit Britain, but also another agency called BDRC, who run weekly consumer sentiment trackers. And they're made available via the Growth Platform website. So if you want those updates, they are produced weekly. We basically summarise them and provide you with a link then through to those sources of information. So again, I'd encourage you to go on there. You can sign up for that information too, and we'll make sure we can send that directly out to you. But just a couple of the headlines kind of this week really, and last week was just the general kind of increase, I suppose, in consumer confidence. Sort of 36% plan to visit a restaurant in the next 3 months, which is obviously encouraging. 80% of those surveyed claim that they are intending to book a hotel accommodation within the next 3 months. And there's also quite a favourable increase in response of people planning to visit attractions as well. So where it did start at quite a low base, as you can appreciate, kind of 2 to 3 months ago, that confidence seems to be returning now, which is obviously key critical for us. Just moving very quickly on, again, I just touched on before about the Growth Platform website, and that's obviously linked through to all the work that colleagues are doing in Visit Wirral, Visit Sefton and Southport, obviously Visit Liverpool too. So the linkages are there. I would encourage you to go onto that website, look at it. There is general information around government grant support, access to finance and the job retention scheme. All the information you'll need around the COVID-19 secure guidelines is on there too, and they are updated weekly, just to make you aware of that. And also there's lots of information there around the access to local advice and grant support initiatives, and all the webinars that will be taking place that may be relevant to you. Again, that's all updated weekly, and there is a calendar of webinars that you can access. There's also a lot of sector-specific stuff in there that I mentioned before, so particularly links through to UK's hospitality. All the linkages there to Visit Britain and Visit England websites are there too. The tier updates are on there that Janet mentioned earlier on. So there's quite, I won't go through it all, but there's quite a lot of detail there for you if you choose to go and have a look at it. Just in terms of medium-term priorities, this is where we've really been focusing our energies, because there's been so much time and resource put into the immediate kind of crisis phase, which is absolutely key critical. We've also had to look very clearly at what does the next 12 months look like for us, and what do we need to do in that space. And there's a couple of things here, and it's a shame I can't get the presentation up, because there's a nice graphic which sort of tries to articulate what we're trying to do. There's two areas of work that we're focused on at the moment. The first one is the demand side, which is what do we do? And this alludes back to what Chris was saying before around things like destination marketing, conferences, those things that generally generate demand and bring people to our city region. And then what do we do on the supply side, which is very much around the business support that will need to be put in place, not just now, but also over the long term, because we recognise that businesses, particularly in our sector, are going to have to change the business models, are going to have to operate and maybe generate revenue in very, very different ways than they've been used to. And this is going to be key critical for survival. And it's also going to be key critical as we transition through to this new normal in that sense. So there are two sides of work there, one of which we're developing, as I say, with the combined authority, both sides we're developing with the combined authority. The CA recovery plan is split into 4 areas, and there's 3 of them which are really relevant to us, one of which is the business ecosystem. There's one strand called place and infrastructure, and there's another strand called people. And I think the reassuring thing across all of those strands is the visitor economy has got significant profiles, such as the importance of it to the city region's economy and to the combined authority. And that kind of articulates really what Steve was saying before. What we're now doing is working with the combined authority to make sure those asks are clear and understood in terms of what the sector needs through things like marketing, things like conference subvention, things like events, but also things like the specific interventions around business support that will be needed. And what will then happen with them, they'll go through to a series of government asks, which we anticipate will happen in kind of late June, early July. So we've got to move quite quickly with this one. And just to really kind of finish up on what the work I'm doing, I suppose, with regards to those asks, what we're trying to do and what we will be doing over the next 2 to 3 weeks or so is to, and this is where we really do need your support, is to try and gather some more evidence, because a lot of this funding that we have the potential to access is based on a very clear evidence base. So what we'll be doing through the growth platform in collaboration with our colleagues at NL and the other local authorities is putting out a business survey, which will also work through the local chambers of commerce too. We're looking to put that out next week. That will probably have about a 3-week duration period. And that'll be looking at the assessment of the business support you've had to date, but also what you will potentially need going forward. And it's really important that we get a good cross-section across all the subsectors within the local economy, local visitor economy, to help us start to understand where the needs and where the investment needs to be made. The final bit of the work that we're doing at the moment is a lot of work with the digital and the creative sector. We have a digital creative board as well as the visitor economy board. And one thing that's really kind of struck us front and centre is the need to kind of become much better at the use of digital, not necessarily just for now in terms of the way that it can help businesses survive and it can help them to reach new markets, but also the longer term solutions that will be needed in terms of, dealing with the issues around coronavirus in terms of touchless technology, the way that you virtually can take product to market. We've got a great example of that today. And there's due to be, and we are hoping to get quite a lot of dialogue between visitor economy businesses in that space, but also the technology businesses that are operating in the city region as well. And what I'd be really grateful for, again, if you could send through any businesses that are prepared to be part of that conversation, I'd really like to hear from you so that we can start that dialogue going. There's also another initiative called LCR for Start, which is also something you can access free and is on the Growth Platform website, where we can actually offer you some kind of advice around free mapping for your digital journey. So if you are If you have sort of embraced the digital world, then we can start to understand where there may be gaps. If you haven't, then we can actually start to help you move into that space and help your business in that sense. So they're the kind of main inputs from me as things stand at the moment. So as I say, it'd be really good if we can get any feedback on the business survey, business guidance survey, and also the kind of need to engage on this kind of digital conversation that we will hopefully start to have over the next kind of 2 to 3 weeks or so. So thank you for listening. I hope that was really helpful.
Okay, thanks very much, Pete. And we'll make sure, by the way, that we get those slides out to you as part of the follow-up from today. I'll also attach to you for that also some local visitor resident sentiment work that we did, which is interesting because it provides a slightly different context to what people are feeling like nationally. So a couple of headlines off that. I think we've got 80% of our local residents can't wait to get out and about, but around 50% of that audience are also concerned or want to be assured that safety measures will be in place. And that gives you that slight, I want to be out and about, but I'm also a little bit concerned. And Paul will be very happy that the #1 choice for where they wanted to do first was to go to a restaurant. Yeah, so that was good news. So we'll give you the link into that as well. Some really good information in there. So let's crack on. So delighted now to introduce Laura Pye, the chair of the Visitor Economy Board. And Laura will say a few words, and then she'll also bring in and discuss with the 4 panelists that I mentioned earlier. So over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. So as Chris says, I am the chair of the Visitor Economy Board, but along with all of my other board members, we do that as a voluntary position. So we also have a day job, and as a day job, I am the director of National Museums Liverpool. So like I'm sure all of you watching, I am equally drowning in risk assessments, policies, cash flow projections, flexible furloughing, visitor confidence, all of that stuff that I know that we're all dealing with and is a big concern for all of us. My role in terms of the Visitor Economy Board is basically one of advocacy and making sure that the voice of the visitor economy is heard. And so I've spent quite a lot of time with the support of the rest of the board and Pete speaking to, you know, at LEP meetings. I've had a number of meetings with DCMS, with BAYS, as part of the Liverpool City Region recovery groups, and also supporting the Liverpool City recovery groups and some of the work that's happening there. So I'm trying to be feeding in all of that information, but really I can't do any of that without the other board members who represent different sectors and different areas. So within the board, we have representation from Liverpool One and from the airport and from the Hospitality Association, but we also have representation from each of the city and the boroughs, and those guys have joined me today. So I think we'll start with Bill, who chairs the Liverpool Visitor Economy Board, who's going to give a bit of an update on where things are at in Liverpool. Bill?
Thanks. Sorry, thanks, Laura. Yeah, you threw me then, but thank you for that. You only threw me because that wasn't the running order we were having. But anyway.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. I wasn't asleep. Great to see you all, and thanks for the attendance today. Elven, as you know, supports the visitor economy across the city of Liverpool, which contributes by £3.3 billion out of the 4.9 billion of the city region. Elven normally meets on a quarterly basis, but from the beginning of this lockdown period, actually on St. Patrick's Day, we've been meeting on a weekly basis, taking 2 hours every Tuesday morning just to review and moving through very much the different phases of this, of the pandemic. So moving from crisis into the pre-recovery, recovery, and looking towards transformation. So our key role initially was providing information and resource and reassurance to our businesses, understanding what was happening, trying to disseminate and provide information. And I won't go into all the details of the work that Steve Rotheram mentions, a couple of the campaigns, the Raise the Bar, Forgotten Limited, and also working very closely with the City Council, because Elven includes City Council Marketing Liverpool and Culture Liverpool within the constituents of Elven. I just wanted to pick up on 2 things, because now we know we're moving towards recovery and we're trying to recover our visitor economy as quickly as possible. Bearing in mind that at the centre of this, and it's all about the fact that right in the heart of this is a virus that has killed as far as we are told, 39,000 people. And when you put that into a context, you think, I'm an Evertonian. I go to Everton, used to go to Everton for all the home games. That's the average crowd at Goodison Park, which is almost capacity. That's 39,000 people. That's just what made me really realise the context of all of this and why we have closed our businesses, why we're working from home, why we're working within these new ways. But yes, that's horrendous statistics, and you think about the figures across the world, but we have an economy that we need to get working, because we won't be able to survive as a city region if we don't get our economy right, and if we don't get our visitor economy working, and working quickly, but working in a safe way. So we are currently working as a city across two sectors. One of those within our visitor economy is our retail core in the city centre, and getting it ready to be opened on the 15th of June, which is now a week on Monday, working with Liverpool One, ourselves, Royal Albert Dock, our shopping centres, working on a communications strategy and a support strategy that you will have seen by now. The messages: be patient, be kind, be responsible, which is the messaging that we will use throughout this campaign here in the city. And then also now turning towards July the 4th, we're waiting for the notification from central government when the rest of our hospitality sector, in particular our restaurants and hotels, can start to open up again, and how we can do that safely. You will have noticed, those of you who operate in Liverpool, that behind us is Castle Street, and that's a photograph we took when we, within the Liverpool Bid Company, closed Castle Street, which we do one day every year. You know that we're working with the City Council, and Mayor Anderson announced that, quite apart from the Reopening High Street Safely Fund that government have given, he has also managed to find, and through the good work of Culture Liverpool, £450,000, which will be used toward supporting the visitor economy, and particularly the food eateries, restaurants, cafes, to open up onto the streets. And that's what we are working on very hard at this moment, which is called the Love Liverpool Without Walls. I'm getting lost with campaigns. Love Your Liverpool, Liverpool Without Walls. And you'll hear more about that as that starts to ramp up and that starts to be operated, so that from July onwards, hospitality businesses, particularly restaurants, will be able to open onto the streets. Elvent, of course, includes John Lennon Airport. As Laura's just said, that the VEB board has got Liverpool John Lennon Airport on that as well, and very clearly that key elements within our visitor economy in the city are our two Premier League clubs, our airports, our arena and convention centre, our universities, our major events groups, the Knowledge Quarter, our nighttime economy, all our elements that we are working together to see how we can get business open as quickly as possible, whilst we're continuing to lobby central government, because we know the furloughing scheme is programmed to end in October, when it will have a major impact if we don't get our businesses open. So there's a lot of work that's going on at the moment. I'd leave that there with Liverpool. There have been some questions that we'll pick up later, and some items on chat which we'll also pick up later.
Okay, thanks for that.
That's across to you, Laura, for that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. So not to freak out the rest of my board, the running order I have is that I'm going to Paul and then Peter and then Edward. So I will hand over to Paul Askew, who, as well as running one of Liverpool's finest restaurants, is the representation for the Wirral on the board. Paul.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for inviting me along today. Very interesting to hear all the updates from the previous speakers. And like you, Laura, apart from my role as chair of the Wirral Visitor Economy, which has been a roller coaster just as any of the other of the boroughs, obviously we were hoping to build on our successes of the Borough of Culture year last year, which obviously Metro Mayor Steve Rotheram had instigated with the borough initiative. And of course this year was going to be the legacy, building on the successes, opening up spaces and cultural assets that maybe hadn't been used very much before, and we were looking very much forward to cashing in on all those successful events and hard work that went on, only for them to be dashed. And unfortunately, we have had to announce that September now will be moved back to 2021. So our September to Remember campaign will be coming back, but in a year's time. So Wirral, like the other boroughs, no doubt, is sort of repurposing its finances, repurposing its manpower, and the recovery planning has begun. So we're very much in line with Liverpool's recovery plan and working hand in hand with the City Council on both sides of the river to make sure that we give a sort of uniform attack, if you like, to getting the businesses back open. With my other hat, I'm also co-chair of the Liverpool Hospitality Association, so forgive me if I dwell on that particular topic for a while, in that, as Bill quite rightly said, we've gone through all the phases of the survival mode, where we were campaigning for Raise the Bar, or the chasing of the insurance companies, the grant funding, you name it. Now dealing with landlords, of course, which is the next pressing matter as we reach June's deadline for the next quarter of rent to be paid. And these all are the things that are being very, very challenging across the country, not just on the Wirral or in Liverpool. And I think very much the collaboration between, people like Bill, people like Chris, Pete Sandman, all the guys that you've got on the screen there. And it's been a real joy, to be honest, to see everybody coming together to push this on. But I have to say the most exciting thing that's come out of it recently was the thing that Bill alluded to, the Liverpool Without Walls, which I would encourage all the boroughs to adopt as part of their strategy moving forward. Because as a restaurateur and a chef by trade, you look at those chairs and tables behind me as you see them on the screen, and they would be reduced from 48 seats to 24 to fit in with a 2-metre rule, something that we're campaigning very hard with Kate Nichols and UK Hospitality, as Liverpool Hospitality is an associate member and affiliated with UK Hospitality. So it's critical that we get that down to either 1.5 or 1 metre. But the joy of the announcement of the 450k fund to bring us out back onto the streets as we open our city centre is that, regardless of that decision, this is the way forward for our hospitality businesses in the city anyway. Liverpool has become the 3rd most visited city in the UK, and as soon as we get the chance, we need to re-establish that and show that the dining scene and that the restaurant and bar scene is still moving forward. We already know our city centre is so popular, and we have to build on that. And as in terms of build it back better, as Steve Rotheram alluded to, what could be better in that we could make, more roads pedestrianised, more green space, more cycling, more trees, just really build on that whole spirit of building back better, working differently to engage with the new world, the new norm, as people keep saying. We have to establish that. And I think by using the funding that's coming through now, it's only really accelerating what we should have been looking at in the future in general. So I'm very much looking forward to that. The 4th of July, as far as I'm concerned, heralds a very big moment to bring my brigade of 35 back off furlough. And I know every hotelier and restaurateur and bar owner on this call today will be looking forward to that time anyway. We've got some tricky calculations to do, as Laura said, with the furlough, the tapering of furlough, bringing them back bit by bit, bringing them back safely, making sure we're compliant. It was great to hear Janet talk about the kite marking, and we'll certainly be looking at that, working with UK Hospitality and Visit Britain. I think it's a fantastic thing to be able to say to your customers and your hopefully domestic travellers that we are, ready for business. We're actually going above and beyond our cleaning regimes, and we're ready to welcome you all back to the friendliest city in the world, which is Liverpool, and its supporting boroughs. So there's lots of good things that are happening. I think quickly, just to finish off, I'm the eternal optimist I am, and I think out of this has shown us that there are opportunities in adversity, and something that we've been focusing on is, particularly in Liverpool, I use my own restaurant as an example, we're about to start click and collect and delivery services, we're hoping to also expand that to, when we're allowed to, going into people's homes and cooking for them in their own backyard, so to speak. And there's been some fantastic initiatives with producers and suppliers where independent delivery services have formed collaborations to make sure that the supply chain is well serviced as well. So, you know, that there are good things happening out there, and it is going to be tough. We all know that. But I think if we continue to work together the way we have, continue to look for those opportunities and build on it, you know, before we know it, we'll be into our stride and back where we belong. So always a message of keep smiling from me, Laura. That's what I always say.
Thank you for that, Paul. And personally, I can't wait for when you're doing click and collect. That sounds fantastic as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
So that's all good. Obviously, I'm going to move over to Pete, who is our link with Sefton, mainly, I guess, focusing on Southport. But Pete, I know Sefton and Southport are struggling in terms of visitor economy at the moment. So over to you.
Okay, I'll try and get through this. I'm right. I've written it down so I get all the points. So apologies if I look like I'm reading. I am. I'm speaking today for Sefton as Chairman of Marketing Southport. I'm happy, however, to respond to questions from a wider national destination perspective as Chief Executive of British Destinations. A little bit of context might not be needed, but I feel I should. Sefton has a population of some 270,000 spread across a dozen centres of differing sizes. The two biggest are Bootle at the extreme south, a couple of miles outside Liverpool centre, and at the narrow, far north, Southport, some 18 miles and 40 minutes by train from Liverpool centre. A third, or 90,000 of Sefton residents live there. Southport was built and remains a genteel seaside resort and retail centre, hemmed in by the sea at the north and west, westland and deep peatlands to the east, and sand dunes and farmland to the south. Building big sheds or doing distribution isn't an option. Placemaking and visitor economy are the key critical elements to the town, and in turn to Sefton. So critical that most of Sefton's non-resident visitor economy is vested in Southport. And Southport is second only to Liverpool Centre in terms of tourism product and tourism value and volume within the city region. Of note, Southport's product market and market demands and supply profile are very different to that of Liverpool city centre, far more traditionally family staying and day trip orientated and more seasonal. In normal times, that difference adds to the Liverpool City Region offer and attraction. The COVID crisis and reopening and recovery, in the COVID crisis, reopening and recovery, the difference does need to be recognised and it needs to be addressed. COVID-19 then. To date, the primary focus has been on servicing and managing the crisis. The catastrophic loss of business, the initial loss of Easter and two key early season bank holidays, critical to the start of the leisure tourism season, and the loss of the shoulder and early season conferencing and events has been difficult. And it's got worse still as the main season and late shoulder month conference and events also have been progressively cancelled, making the nature of reopening for Southport and immediate and longer term recovery prospects increasingly unpredictable. For example, the loss of David Urquhart Travel and the Specialist Leisure Group and its 9 brands last week added uncertainty to our hotels, many of whom use group travel as a key tool to smooth the seasonal ebbs and flows of business. If the demand returns, there just may not be the vehicles, the coaches to actually carry that market. What have we learned in this kind of first phase? Well, the importance of destination management and the perils of entirely voluntary engagement for individual businesses and therefore for destinations as a whole. We can only communicate with those who are there to listen. Retrofixing the contacts and engagements in a crisis has proved to be quite difficult. Like many on the coast, rural destinations like Southport have been caught out by the change to national travel rules. And that's been compounded by really good weather. Beach facilities remain closed, services are limited, marketing messages remain see you later, and yet direct requests to stay away have gone largely unheeded. This is still part of the survival phase and not reopening, because the visitors are adding almost nothing to the local economy, but are generating large additional costs and staffing pressures, while alienating many worried residents. The lesson is that pent-up demand has to be managed, but with what do I mend that particular bucket? Moving forward, I predict that attracting customers during the reopening and the early recovery might be the least of our worries. Servicing demand and doing it to benefit private and public sector tourism economies is going to be the real issue. Moving on and looking at first phase of recovery, the gradual reopening as I'd like to look at it. There are a huge number of unknowns here and much is a work in progress. We, for example, are looking at whether quality in tourism, QT, safe, clean and legal might provide an additional, and I stress, an additional customer assurance to that VB and the National Kite Scheme is going to offer. There will be a cost involved, so that's a difficulty. And we, of course, have to await the detail from Visit England before we can commit any further. We're looking to take on social media messaging off its on hold message and take it forward onto other platforms. That's going to be difficult. We've lost circa 80,000 from private sector contributions to marketing Southport, and there has been a far greater loss from Sefton itself. So the wheres, the whys and the how-fors of marketing are still a work in progress. The recovery proper, you'll not be surprised to hear that we've been working with Pete Sandman, and in effect our main recovery plan mirrors theirs. To do anything else would be unproductive and frankly a stupid thing for us to do. We do recognise, however, that the main elements, that of development and funding, may take some time to come to us. It may well be the 2021 season before we see recovery proper. What happens from the start of reopening, essentially from mid-June through to July and beyond, and to the beginning of the recovery later this year, or into next year beyond that, is questionable. My crystal ball currently fails me. I or we have plenty of ideas and are making them known to government, but until we have operational guidance and dates and timing, absolute clarity around social distancing, for example, it's difficult to know. And it's very difficult to understand how reopening actually leads to economic recovery. Those of you listening in will know far better than I, that, for example, that the degree of difference between a 2 metre social distancing rule and a 1.5 or a 1 metre rule could make all the difference in this. There are a huge number of other issues that I could rabbit on about, but I think I'll leave that to questions and answers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for joining us there. That's great. And yeah, your point around whether the problem will be demand or not enough people is one that we're certainly battling within the museum. So I'm sure other businesses are worrying about that too. I'm going to hand over to Edward, who is our link with Knowsley and also, of course, runs Knowsley Safari Park. So can maybe update us on how the animals are doing, Edward.
Laura, thanks very much. Yeah, on the animals, some of them have quite enjoyed the peace and quiet actually, but the baboons have missed the enrichment that normally comes with cars. But some of the animals have really taken advantage of it. We've had some good births actually, which hopefully our guests will have a look at whenever. But Knowsley, as with all of you, it's been a bit of a curate's egg. There have been some tragedies. We are no different when it comes to our restaurants, our pubs, our attractions. But there are some positive stories. There's no question about it. I was delighted to see the BBC report that Prescott itself was one of the 20 smaller town centres in the UK whose footfall had just decreased by less than 60%, which is, I think, incredible, because the majority of high streets have fallen by about 83%. And I think it was an interesting comment from Springboard, who are the retail analyst company, who said that the path of recovery for retail may or be led by the smaller high streets, which can offer both safety and those community benefits. And I've been really inspired by some of the little independents that have converted very quickly to online. I had a tweet yesterday to say that the Albion Bakehouse is selling local honey now. So I think that there's been some real positives within the tight-knit independent community. Prescott itself has had plenty of noise. The theatre continues to be built. There's just been one subcontractor, and they've lost barely a week's work on the Shakespeare Theatre, which is fantastic news. And talking to Paula Williams yesterday, they're about to recruit for a creative director who will look after the first year of Shakespeare North's cultural programme, but also lead the cultural event for Prescott and Knowsley Borough of Culture. We're quite lucky in terms of our Borough of Culture as 2022. We were inspired by Wirral.
We appear to have lost.
He did just a fantastic job. And so I think the other good thing about the Shakespeare Theatre is that actually Peter McCurdy, who built the Globe, is still on track very much with his with his timber work. The safari, Chris asked us whether we had issues, challenges and opportunities. We certainly have issues with the safari. You've probably seen a lot of the news about Chester Zoo, and it's just been one of those extraordinary things. We were prepared in the safari to open on the 6th of June, only on Sunday evening, Monday morning, to be slapped a statutory instrument that actually we are one of the businesses, along with zoos and aquariums, that must close. It's on occasions like this where I think our membership organisations really start to earn their money, and we've been very impressed with Alba, Piazza, UK Hospitality, and Historic Houses when it comes to the hall. And I also commend our MPs, George Howarth, who's managed to get our concerns into the Cabinet Office, up to Nigel Huddleston, the Tourism Minister, into the DCMS with Oliver, the Culture Secretary. And if you can, I really feel it's a time to try and lobby those MPs. Our local authority have been very good indeed. They will hopefully support us in a letter to the Secretary of State for the Environment, saying that in fact the Safari Park is a perfect place to be safe and enjoy the outdoors. The hall itself, and I think a lot of other wedding venues would sympathise with us. It's been extraordinary. We are starved of information. We don't know what the safe distancing rule is going to be. I asked my team, who haven't been furloughed, how can you see a wedding happening in the future? And of course, we shrug our shoulders thinking, well, we've absolutely no idea. Does our risk assessment deny a dance floor, for instance? Do we think of other ways of doing weddings? What we will be doing quite soon is to start show rounds again, because it's just vital to get the pipeline of business going into 2021 and 2022. I'm delighted to say that our brides and our grooms have kept faith with us, and not one has cancelled. They've all postponed, but they're all getting very nervous because of the lack of clarity from government. And again, what we find is difficult. It's hard to plan because there are so many contradictions in life. You can go to an outdoor market, you can go to a nature reserve, but you can't actually go to a safari or a zoo. So we are incredibly frustrated, but there are opportunities. There's no question about it. And I think it's an opportunity for us to really look and see how we do things. I spoke to Suites Hotel today, and unbelievably, they are at 43% occupancy because they closed for 3 days. They managed to get a contract with the NHS. We've had all the hay. And so they're housing a number of key workers, but they've gone down from 106 staff to 5. There are 5 staff servicing that 43% occupancy. So I think there are opportunities. It's just the uncertainty, the illogicality from government, the lack of information. We still have the 4th of July in our minds. We are ready to go in the safari. We're ready to go in the hall itself, and a lot of the other businesses are ready to go. We just need that certainty, that confidence that we've mentioned already. So I think issues, plenty of challenges, lots of opportunities, but we do see ourselves in Knowsley very much as part of the wider city region. And I think it's very important for us to consider ourselves part of that city region, because we've got a number of new houses being built in the borough, and it's what on our doorstep is really appealing and attractive to those new homeowners. And I know that Chris and I, we talk about the whole place, and we do feel very much part of that wider city region now, and really want to play our part in its recovery.
Okay, thank you, Edward. That's great. I'll hand back to you, Chris. I think we're going to do some questions.
Yep, great. Thanks very much there. And yeah, just picking up there from Knowsley, I'm quite heavily involved in the Shakespeare North project, and it's great to see that is, you know, throughout this crisis has been continually built and built out, and we'll be on schedule for 22, which is great. So yeah, let's spend the last 15 minutes or so on some of the questions that have come forward from you. I know some of the panelists have answered some of those that have come through the chat. Just going to raise one which are going to just broaden a little bit to all of you, really, that as we come out of this lockdown into recovery, around 20% of the UK population is currently disabled. Yeah. So how do we believe that we can encourage people with disabilities to visit the region? How can we a joined up approach about doing that? And how do we also help those who are potentially going to be shielded and unable to participate in this recovery? So maybe I might start with you, Janet, on that one, and then anybody else on the panel which wants to come into that.
Yes, certainly. I think we should look at disabled in the round and not just think of the visual disablement, because I think certainly coming out of lockdown, we're going to have an awful lot of people that are, you know, whether it's an autism or whether it be through a mental health situation, we're going to be dealing with a lot of very challenging situations. So I think it's going to be back to that issue of recognising that those things are there and working with those charities that are able to help us with this. And I know that Ross in our team, who leads on accessibility, he provides a lot of information on the Business Advice Hub in this area. But I think the key thing is it's about what can we do to be mindful of the issues that may arise in terms of what could be needed with crowds when you're coming back into a crowded place. And I think that's two-way. We haven't only just got to think about visitors, we've got to think about staff, because I think that's the other issue here, where we've got situations where staff are coming out of a rather challenging, either been furloughed or been working from home and are suddenly out into a busy space. So yeah, it's not just about those physical disabilities, it's about those mental situations as well.
Okay. And I know, Laura, this is something that you're very keen on as well. So what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I guess more from a National Museums Liverpool point of view, it's something we're discussing at length at the moment, particularly around the shielding. You know, we fully understand that a significant minority of our community can't come back when we open our doors. And so we're going to continue our digital content in terms of digital tours and all of those kind of stuff. And in terms of those that maybe are just a bit more cautious about coming back, or that have some form of disability that may make coming back out more difficult, we'll obviously be opening the museums with a much reduced capacity to begin with. But we are also looking at the possibility of doing quiet mornings with a further reduction in capacity for those visitors that may have additional needs, and that we can give them some additional support if they can come out.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Thanks. That was a question from Ian at Able Eye Limited. So just move on to maybe something that Peter and might want to pick up is around the impacts on travel trade, and you mentioned in your talk there, Peter, about the damaging impact it's had with Urquharts and others going. What's your general take on the return, or where you think travel trade now sits in terms of people potentially getting back in a coach again and coming to somewhere like Southport, coming to a major attraction like Knowsley Safari Park? I know you'll have concerns about that. What's your general view about how that might begin to pan out?
Like many things at the moment, it's, am I on? Yes.
Yep.
Like many things at the moment, my crystal ball turns out to be a cunningly painted banister knob. What we're trying to assess is actually the scale of the damage. Urquharts was the biggest independent, and the shearings, national holidays, etc., from the big group are huge providers of coaching. But beyond that, for example, National Express use other companies. So the feeling is that it's not so much whether people will want to go on to coaches, it's whether there will be physically coaches available to get on them, because a significant proportion of the companies will have closed. There's also an issue, I mentioned about the hotels. I think we've only just suddenly clicked and realised how important the group travel is as a filler, and therefore in keeping companies going 365 days. There's an issue around that. But there's also another issue about tours, day trips within tours. So a coach that comes and stays at Southport for 3 or 4 days actually doesn't stay in Southport for 3 or 4 days. It might go out to Knowsley, it might take people out to X and Y, and working out what those impacts are, like a lot of other impacts are currently beyond anybody's sense. Even their trade bodies are finding it very difficult to assess at the moment the physical number of coaches and therefore consequences. I know that's not helpful, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and Edward, I know you rely at the safari park there a lot on sort of coach traffic and such forth.
Actually, well, underdeveloped our coach trade. It's something we're going to be developing a lot more, and I think that the whole idea of travel, I think, is going to be an interesting one. We're lucky because actually people will come to us in their own cars. And we're often perceived, well, to be honest with you, sometimes coaches just bypass and go into Liverpool or into Southport. That is an opportunity, I think, that we've really got to develop in the future, because we are tailor-made for that. But yeah, it is terrible news about Urquhart's going under. It was just shocking, and I think they won't be the last one, sadly.
Okay, thanks very much. And that, Bill and Paul, it's 2 questions I'll come to you on. One, I think there's obviously a lot of interest in this Liverpool without walls concept. So maybe, Bill, just a point from you on the context of the pedestrianisation agenda and the speed of that and how you see that moving going forward. And then Paul Lally from the Festive Group has sent me a rather depressing thing by telling me there's 29 weeks left until Christmas. So I hadn't kind of thought about that too much. But it's a serious question in the context of the fact that is a really important time for businesses and to get themselves prepared for that in advance, and maybe what the views of the panel are about, you know, looking forward to a festive season and what kind of festive season it might well be. So I don't know which order you want to take them, or we want to answer those in the order I've given them, or whatever you want. So I'll start with you, Bill.
Thanks, Chris. Liverpool without walls very much is about us doing exactly that. It's about giving breathing space to restaurants, because if a restaurant, as we've talked about, it has to social distance within 2 meters, they can't physically expand internally, so they have to expand externally. But that is only onto a public realm, public highways. And we know in the UK our highways are managed by the Highways Act 1980s and all the various different addendums and changes to that. And so we have UK government legislation, we have the local authorities, and we have a normal process that would take 3 months. We have 3 weeks to try and get it resolved. So we're working at pace to do that. We are working very closely with highways initially, because the first point is what space is available. And when we establish that, which we are doing very quickly, then what can we do with it? So I would just say, if you trust us to work on it, which we are working hard at pace, you're involved in it, Chris, Paul's involved in it, Paul Sherpo from the Chamber of Commerce, as is Robin Kemp from Culture Liverpool, as are national, international designers looking at this from an overall perspective, because this isn't about an immediate, it is about an immediate response to something, but it is also about the long-term aspiration of the city to become, we are an international city, we already know that, but we need the infrastructure within the city to replicate the fact that it's an international city. So the long-winded response to it was that we're working hard on it, we will try and get as much space as possible, but people also drive buses. people also need to use pavements. People have to travel across the city. So it's bringing all of those together with all of those stakeholders, doing it safely, but doing it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think just to reinforce what you're saying there, Bill, I think the clear message that's come out, particularly from the mayor on this, is very much about this is an opportunity to reimagine, repurpose, and set a different set of ambitions for our city centre, not just for the next 3 or 4 months, but for the next number of years. And I think if that direction is maintained and retained, we'll see a very different and a better, more coordinated city going forward. So I think for everybody listening, it is about that fact we're trying to move as fast as possible, but it is about making sure we do it well. It's got a high quality threshold to it, and it's built for a sustainable and longer, medium to long term future.
Yeah, and I was just going to echo that, Chris, just to say that the reason we've got this fund is because of the fact that we are working together. Although we're working from home, we're working in a disparate way. We're all working together closer than we've ever worked together again. And I know we're rushing and finishing, but if you want to pick up on Christmas, happy to talk about that later. But in all honesty, Christmas this year will not be like Christmases we've seen in the past. Yes, we know Christmas Day will be December the 25th. I think all of us will just be glad to get there. And I haven't got a clue what it will look like in the city, whether we'll have Christmas lights, Christmas trees. To be honest, we just need to get businesses open. That's the priority.
Yeah. So it's maybe an opportunity for Paul to give your vision for the art school at Christmas.
well, firstly, just to pick up, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Just to pick up on where Bill left off, really, I think it's massively important that we've all talked about building that confidence for customers and guests to the city to return and not be afraid. And the one way of doing that is to show people out in the open, this is where we are. We're back open for business. We're doing things in a different way, but it's there for you. Come and enjoy it. And it's a clear statement. And I think that was very much in Joe's mind. And of course, it feeds perfectly into Steve Rotheram's plan of building back better, as I said before. I would love to see, hopefully with Laura's help, some of the artistic assets, cultural assets of the city come out onto the street as well, if they're allowed. I know there's insurance issues and all sorts of things, but again, the artists of the city, the musicians of the city, all of these people have to play a part. So Liverpool Without Walls is not just for restaurants, even though clearly I have a vested interest in that, but it's genuinely about banging the drum and saying, we're back open for business. Come on, guys, let's get moving again. In terms of Christmas, we have actually started looking at Christmas already, believe it or not, in answer to your question. And it'll be very much building on the click and collect, the delivery, because we are pretty sure that we won't be able to go back to the number of covers that we're allowed to normally. And of course, the big gatherings that you would normally hope for in private dining rooms and private bars and function rooms like Knowsley Hall and Southport hotels. And, we all know that that's a way away. So we have to look at it and just do it differently. We've got to, it's got to happen. Life goes on. We've got to be able to let people enjoy and celebrate, but it will be different, as Bill said. And I think the sooner we get open and build that confidence and push on, the better we'll do it, the better job we'll do of it. So.
Right, thanks. And I think, Janet, in kind of bringing this session to a conclusion, I think hopefully what you've picked up from being part of this webinar today is the huge passion, ambition, and real drive of the various parts of the city region, massed against a real frustration against the lack of clarity and the difficulty in trying to get government to understand the needs to basically accelerate their decision making, make it better, accept the fact that actually they can't come out with a decision on the 3rd of July about how the sector is going to work on the 4th of July. They need to give enough time to this sector and its supply chains to get themselves mobilized, to get themselves interested. And I think the current status quo as it is at the moment is that even businesses and corporate businesses, and I've talked to a few recently, who want to make a booking for an event, want to actually do something, they can't do it because they don't know with surety that the venue they may want to use will be able to accommodate it, will be open at that moment in time. And all of these things are really, frustrating the economy as much as anything else. And we do realise it's a difficult job, but I hope through the work that you do at Visit Britain and others, we can start to get, and maybe through the task force, we can start to get some clarity around this as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, and we do hear that, Chris, and we hear that from across the country, and that is, you know, we all want that. We want that clarity and that reassurance, because we want to get to that point where we can confidently say, this is where we are going, this is where we will be by Christmas. But we are in a pandemic, and we're in that situation where it is an unknown, and an unknown is really challenging, because of course there is always that fear, could there be a wave 2, and that you can't ignore that. But equally, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it is across the country.
Okay, so we said we'd finish this at 4ish, and we are going to finish it at 4ish. So first and foremost, I hope you've enjoyed the session. We'll make sure all the questions are forwarded to the Metro Mayor as we discussed with them right at the very start. Thanks for all the panelists that contributed today. Many thanks to MSP for providing the virtual studio today. MSP are also part of the forgotten in terms of the director issue, and we sincerely hope that on behalf of all those part of the Forgotten Limited, that government do make some progress, or decide to make some progress to alleviate the hardship that has been unfairly caused to that particular group. But thanks very much for joining us. There's going to be many more things to talk about. We'll be back on again with colleagues at the BID next Thursday for another webinar. We'll continue to strive to basically make sure that this brilliant visitor economy that represents all parts of the city and city region returns to the vibrancy that it had. I'm sure it hasn't lost any of its ambition, and I'm sure we'll be back stronger, bigger and better in the future. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks for joining us. Cheerio now.
Thank you.